I also have, because of this, has big experience with Python packaging. So next to Napari topic, you might try to reach me also in this context. Okay. So what is Napari? Napari is viewer, as you could see here. The data. There is a data. Well, it is native application. The architecture for this for Napari allows to provide a web interface for these same data structures, and it is on the roadmap, but it's not working correctly. Why the native first? Because pushing big data through the network stack is not a good idea. Maybe from our tests in many situations, using the virtual desktop is faster than pushing huge data to visualize using JavaScript. It is pluggable. The Napari itself comes only with really small amount of tools. Something like drawing, adding points, only really basic things. Most of utilities for a person who uses Napari comes from the plugins. And that's Python, it's also hackable. But why talking about this? It could be easy, the plugins are really, really easy to create. So if you have some task with multidimensional data, you have some code, it could be easy to convert to a plugin to provide interface. And it's also embeddable, so there is no problem to use the mainly viewer part, not other part of GUI, or viewer part and some parts of GUI, to create your own application which is more sufficient to your needs. Okay, what the data type are supported in Napari? This is why I'm talking that not only images. The images. Images is any dimensional array of values, the pixels. The labels. Labels are almost same like image, but the one object is identified by single value. So the object 1 is all pixels that have value 1. And on this example, you could see image. This is this green and magenta. There are two images, and labels, for example, is here visible and here. The next data types which are available are points. You could see, okay, labels is here, points you could see, the shape is here. So shape is some, like in SVG, this is the shape. The other formats that I don't have examples to show at this moment is the surface, the tracks, the vectors. And it's not ready released, but it's close, the graph. Until now, the person who used it for to visualize a graph in the multidimensionals use the points plus vectors layer. And there is a work to merge it to make it easier. For example, someone delayed the point, so there is no need to manually delete edges or write your own callback function to delete edges. So as you could see, it supports really huge amount of data types. And if, for example, it is easy to extend, not maybe so easy that you could extend it on your side because part of API is still unstable, but it's not a problem to make a PR with such contribution. Okay, I don't thought maybe most importantly, this is totally open source project hosted and running on GitHub. What data types it support? The primary data type and most used is NumPy arrays. So this is what most of you may know. Currently, it well works with labels and images with dust. Maybe, okay, with images. and in some situation labels with Dask arrays and ZAR arrays. Both ZAR and Dask are different way to store data too huge to load into the memory. The ZAR could be even fetched from remote server. The Dask are local, but with cache on hard drive. And maybe, who develop, why develop, and why it shows. This is something maybe a little uncommon in the scientific world because there is no single scientific group behind this project. There are multiple scientists around the world who find, okay, I have such task that could be simplified by Napari, but there need to be something fixed. And part of these people just came with contribution. Part of these people becomes a core developer on the project, like me. Unfortunately, we don't have core developer which works for company. Okay, there is a person who works for company, but on the as a scientist. But the contribution comes from many people. So there is no centralized place of decision. There is no closing option. And anyone could contribute without any problem. Okay. The only limitation to contribution is if you have a use case outside the domain knowledge of core developers, you might be asked to provide more extended tests. As we worry that if it is outside our competence, we could easily break it and do not notice this because we don't know, we don't have this type of domain knowledge. The Napari name, you might heard it earlier, because it's name of the island on the Pacific Ocean between San Francisco and Australia, in the middle of the two groups of persons who start initially working on this project. At this moment, and this is the list of things about which we know, because we also know that there are many people who are using Napari and don't even reach core developer team to share for what they use. So the source is the bioimage analysis. Most of the person from the initial team are working on different biological images and want to annotate, to visualize them, to trace the changes or something like this. The material science, it's quite similar to bioimaging. Sometimes you need to take a look, to close look to some structure and to understand what happens in the polymers, in the metal, to identify it. We know about GeoJSON data. One of our core developers sometimes work with this. But in general, use the images map and placing the object and do some checks. But I'm pretty sure that there is much more usage, but maybe Napari works enough well that person don't even reach us with any questions. The case for which I need to highlight, in general the code is BSD free clause, so there is no problem in the context of Napari code. But there is a decision to use Qt as a backend. The decision to use a Qt as a backend is because at the time of making this decision, Qt is only graphical toolkit that works on every main operating system without any problems. So selecting toolkit that is nicer in context of license but cannot be installed on some system is not a good solution. But what is important? The Qt is under LGPL or paid commercial, but until you ship a product to sell the product to other persons which use such things, you don't even need to think about the license, because if you decide to use Napari, for example, as an internal tool in the group, there is no license problem. This is this old type of licensing that license hits you only when you sell the product. So what are use cases that we know? And I will show also examples of these use cases. So the first usage is application. There is an application that you could launch. The Napari itself provides a bundle, so there is no even need to users have a knowledge how to set up Python environment. And it could launch Napari, install some plugins. What is important also, the plugin could be installed from local files. If you have Python, the plugins are a pure Python package, and you might need to build a SDIS or wheel and just install it to the application. As a viewer, open from script notebook. Maybe some of you have such situation that during work with some data, in the workflow need to open the matplotlib window to preview the data, some result middle to make a decision. Replacing displays with Napari provides more smooth experience, especially if we are talking about big data. And the last use case is it could be embedded as a viewer in own application with own GUI specialized to a given task. At least 3 open source use cases are present in the wild. Okay, so as I told at the beginning, Napari without plugin provides only basic things, but there are multiple plugins. You could create own plugin. You don't need to publish it. But if you don't publish it, then you don't have ability to install it from plugin manager, but by searching them in plugin manager, but it still could be installed locally. Okay, so it betters for your work. I think the white will looks better. Okay. Okay, there's an example of data, or maybe data. I could switch to the 3D view of data, easy, without, this is not super powerful laptop, but this is done native on GPU. So with OpenGL, so there is no problem. Zoom in, zoom out, or for example, use the already installed plugin. This is my plugin, and there is some preset of parameters to not lose. Oh, okay, wrong. And for example, there is a producer of the labeling with segmentation of the cell nucleus. This is quite simple workflow, but as you could see, the viewer itself provides only option, for example, to manually fix annotation or something like this, but does not, you could paint what you want, decide that it's wrong labeling, but this is what ships as an application. The core thing is the plugins, and I will show few things about how plugin a little works later. But you can see this use case. Okay, so the second thing, I will show the example of notebook, because for me it's more natural to use notebooks for such use cases, but it will work also for the script. This is what I will show. So the okay. And as you could see here, there is an import, there is a short information view, create viewer, open, add labels, and now I could just make some annotation manual. Okay. Yes, I should notice this. Okay, so where is? Okay, so there is notebook should be readable now. Okay, so there is imports, some few lines of code to open image, add labels. There is a show with option to block, so there is a need to the code execution will wait until the viewer is closed. It opens a nice image. And for example, let's say I would like to annotate some data. And I could draw some additional drawing. If there is such use case needed, maybe with and after I close the viewer, you could see that there is still access. You could see that there is still access to the data. There is a simple count non-zero, so this is just counting the number of pixels that I paint, but it could be easy entry to any workflow. But also, for example, this is example. It is possible to have viewer open at the same time, like executing something in notebook, or even just change the function in the GUI. So I just create sample wrapper with which do Gaussian, but this is the image. The type annotation is required, and when I run, I need to wait a moment until. Oh, this is okay. This is option to select the image. I could select the there's a need to wait. I think I select too big Gauss radius. Okay, and you could see that there is a created next layer that performs such operation. But what is nice is that I could now run the code. I have access. I could decide, okay, I have some other code that need to be run, so I would like to add points. And we zoom out, and we see that the points are added. So it could be done in both, as you could see, both way. Update and execute, or waiting or not waiting. The waiting mode is mainly, for example, if you would like to use it from script. So you run Python script, it open viewer, you annotate, it wait until you find change modification, something like this, and then continue. Okay. So this is one, and the second example what I would like to show you is a script, but no. Okay, this is simple extension that, for example, someone would like to go fast through images and classify good and bad. So you see that this is not so long code. There is a binding to key. So we have bind to key enter, live, and write to change the images. And okay. Yes, we know that we need to work a little about the startup time. But what could be seen is that I could now use the keyboard just to change the images. If I click enter, there shows some message, but also it means that that there is a good images folder where the data are moved. So for example, if I select another, click enter, you'll see that 2 files are moved. So this is this is example which one of my friends do on the request that someone has few hundred of images and need to do fast selection, that there is no problem with the site by E, but it's problematic to every time you open the image, then manually move it to another folder. So this is the next use case. And I think that maybe, okay, I need to next time scroll. Okay, so this there is information about embedding. You could see on the right. Okay, the only thing now is that as we only provide the Qt backend, it needs to be a Qt application. It needs to be PyQt or PySci backend. 5 or 6 at this moment. Maybe really fast show. Okay, you will not see this. Okay, you now see. So this is even example what I would like to show you, that there is an option to have 2 viewers, because these are two viewers synchronized. This is 2D data, so it will be not so nice, but it could be done even in this way. The only short things are these buttons with the core Napari viewer. Okay, so if anyone is interested to dive a little deeper, there are a few links. I will show the link to where the presentation and materials on the end. So this is the 3 places. The Napari org is the website of the project. The GitHub is the place where the development happens. And forum image SC is the place where many persons playing with images could communicate, ask many questions. So if you just have some workflow that you need to work with images and don't have idea, and in some occasion could share sample of data, it is a good place to start a question. Maybe you find someone who just meet this problem and could answer, and you don't lose the time. Okay, so there is a second part of the presentation, a little wider, because during the development of Napari, some popular patterns were found, and there is a decision to extract them from the core project, because someone who would like to use this utility should not need to be forced to install whole Napari with all dependencies. I will talk about the 3 things: the magic GUI, the easy GUI creating from functions. You could see example of this on this example where I use add-docked function to create a widget in Napari. Okay, so maybe move. And it provides at this moment 2 backends. So IP widgets, so you could create widgets in the notebook or in the Qt view widget. And it could just grab a function with type annotation, or either it provides some simple components. But it could be really nice because you use exactly the same code to create widget in both situations. Okay, so there is a QR code to the project, but I will now, no. Disable to allow you to see. And open a notebook, for example. So I just set to use the IPython as the Qt default. And for example, I have some really simple function. It calculate the multiply of two numbers, but also have a callback, and I could that this code is connected. It could be set a connector, call this function. So let's see, and you could see that it does render GUI. And if I put here number and click run, it calls the callback. So what is interesting in this, then you could provide a function which do some complicated things. And what is also important, for custom type annotation, you could provide your own widgets. So there is no problem, you have your own data types, you could create for it widget and provide for it, register it as a type annotation. So you are not even limited to primitive things. And it allows to connect multiple callbacks, so something later more distributed. But it's also possible to just construct simple widget using such things that there's a container, I add float sliders, and I cut that to change even. This is such utility, and it could be done for both Jupyter and for Qt. We notice that with latest release of Jupyter Lab is some problem, but in classical Node it works very well. So I think that the problem with Jupyter Lab will be solved shortly, but at this moment it does not every time work. Okay, this is the library for the person who work with Qt, but maybe some of you meet this, for example, to develop internal tool, because as I told, if you don't sell the product based on Qt, the license is not a problem. And it provides multiple things that we think that are useful. The decorators that ensure that function is run in the proper thread. It is critical if you try to connect pure Python code with Qt-based code, because the semantics of the Qt requires to some functions will be called in the proper thread. Otherwise, you could get segfault. Thread worker, so this is the decorator that change the function into a thread with one line. You could connect callback, it could work with generator function, with simple function, so you could execute something in backend. It is critical for the GUI application. Some throttling utilities, and also some widget that we think are enough fancy, like enum combo box. So you pass the enum and it creates a combo box. It's 50 lines of code, but why copy it to every project? Or something more sophisticated, like labeled range slider, which you could see on the image, and many others. This is not okay. And PySignal. This you could observe in the example of Magic GUI, that there is an option to connect to something and it triggers a signal. And from our experience, if you provide anything that behaves like interface, so you need to interact with a person, the signals are, so some event queue or something like this need to be used. Why PySignal is nicer than some custom solution that we also meet and check. I think most about the custom solution in the projects. The most common solution is to put some functions on the callbacks list and call them with the values. The problem is that if you use the method, of the objects, putting on such list prevents from garbage collector to delete the object. And it sometimes creates problems from our experience. So we try to address this. This is also implementation of evented data classes, evented pydantic models. So you could just declare it and have events if someone override the value. And this next is that to calling in the proper thread. This is the three of much more things that there is a need to implement. As you could see that these three things that I show does not belong to Napari organization. This is caused because GitHub limits the number of runners for tests and so on based on the organization. So if you are a maintainer of multi-library open source project and you have a problem with availability of free runner for testing, sometimes splitting organization to smaller and move the repos between them could allow you to not pay the GitHub the money. And the Napari tests, because it's the biggest things, are really exhaustive and consume most of the time. So there was a situation that simple change on the tests that are running below the minute are waiting hour for the place in the queue. Okay, so if it looks interesting for any one of you, if you do some similar task or something, you work with images, and I think that it's not something that could be used at this moment as a product to the user, but it could be really useful for the internal teams. Next to catching me here on the conference and talking with me, there are every week is a community meeting. Every 2 weeks it's the morning and it's with the people from Asia, and every 2 weeks is the evening with the people from USA, and there is also chat for questions that looks too short to open issue on a GitHub. And I would like to thank you for your attention. Here's the QR code and link to the repository with all materials used during this presentation.
Thank you very much. Now I have a few questions for you. The first one would be, how does Napari communicate with the notebook?
The Napari don't communicate with notebook, the notebook communicates with Napari. Because we don't have access option at this moment. We don't modify anything in the notebook, but it's just pure object that you could interact with from the notebook. And Jupyter itself provides really nice integration with any Qt application. So the Jupyter provides this ability to have running GUI application that does not block execution of notebook with event loop.
Thank you. And another question, what about support for healthcare data formats like DICOM?
I'm pretty sure that there is a plugin that is able to read this, but I'm not sure if it works with everything. It is, okay, I don't tell this, the plugin could not only provide the widgets, but they could provide readers and writers. So you could provide your custom, if no one of community plugin provide to the plugin that read the data in your format or save the data in your desired format, you could just provide it with a plugin, or if you don't provide a plugin but you call it from a script, there are handlers that allow you to register such reader as an available. Because the one thing that I partially show is that you could create startup script that registers some shortcuts, readers, writers, and so on.
Okay, thank you. Another question, the last one. Is there any calibration procedure to display images on wide gamut displays?
It looks like not Napari related. I think that is the same procedure that like with other software. I don't meet this thing, but if I don't meet such a problem, but I don't have access to such screen. So if the person who asked this question would like to have some more details or something, please catch me and provide more details. Then maybe I will be able to tell something, or I will be able to try to ask other community member if they have such things, such knowledge.
Great, thank you very much for the talk and for the answers. And the next talk is probably coming shortly. Give me a second to see. Yeah, it will be Test-Driven Pandas by Grzegorz Bokota. Thank you very much.